Every year in recruiting, the players that are talked about the most are those who garner the most hype, offers, views, and typically these recruits end up being 5 to 4-star players. If you are a college football sicko or just a fan of your team, there is probably a good chance you keep track of college football recruiting, whether it is only your team or on a national level. Back in the 2022 recruiting class, the Texas A&M Aggies brought in the highest rated recruiting class in modern recruiting history, signing a total of 8 5-stars, 19 4-stars, and 3 3-stars. Of the 30 signees that signed that class, 18 of them ranked inside the top 100 according to the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. Now, with most of these players now entering the NFL draft or having 1 year of eligibility or even possible 2 years of eligibility depending on the case, what happened to the 2022 Texas A&M recruiting class? For the sake of time associated with this video, I will not be talking about every individual player that was a part of this class. Instead, I will be summarizing the class itself, the position group's outlook, and the higher ranked players in said group. Before I move on, remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's get into it. Out of the entirety of the 2022 class for A&M, only 8 players remain on the roster today as of the recording of this video. First, let's talk about the quarterback position. Every recruiting class is usually headlined by the quarterback, and for A&M it was no different, as they would sign the number 2 quarterback in the nation and 5-star Conner Weigman. His time at A&M can be summarized with both highs, lows, and an injury that derailed early momentum in his Aggie career. He would spend a total of 3 seasons at A&M, where he would play in 19 games, completed 60% of his passes, threw for 2,694 yards, 19 touchdowns through the air, and 7 interceptions. He impressed Aggie fans early on with flashes early on in his freshman and sophomore campaigns. However, a season-ending injury took him out early on in his sophomore year during the start of SEC play. And in this most previous college football season in 2024, as a redshirt sophomore, he would have a down year that would eventually lead to his benching for Marcel Reed, which would eventually lead him to entering the transfer portal, where he's now at Houston. A&M would sign one running back, being Le'Veon Moss. Moss, the last few seasons for the Aggies, has shown some real promise, rushing for a career total of 1,363 yards, averaging 5.6 yards a carry, along with 16 touchdowns on the ground. He was having a career year in 2024, rushing for 765 yards, averaging over 6 yards a carry, and had 10 touchdowns on the ground. However, a season-ending injury will wipe him out after just only 9 games for the Aggies in 2024. The class was highlighted by 3 wide receivers: Evan Stewart, Chris Marshall, and Noah Thomas. Evan Stewart played for the Aggies for a total of 2 seasons, where he was an immediate impact player and the team's leading receiver as a true freshman, and was the go-to option on the field as a sophomore in 2023. He would transfer to Oregon after his sophomore campaign and finish his time as an Aggie with 91 receptions, 1,163 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This previous season for Oregon, he recorded 613 yards and 5 touchdowns. Chris Marshall's A&M career would not go the way that Stewart's did. He would play sparingly early on, but after locker room incidents versus Miami, along with 2 other teammates in Denver Harris and Paris Williams, he would end up being suspended indefinitely as a true freshman. At season's end, he transferred to Ole Miss, where he would wind up also being suspended come spring. He would eventually find himself at the JUCO level in 2023, where he eventually became the number 1 JUCO player ranked in the nation for the class of 2024, and would eventually find himself at Boise State next. He would play sparingly in the 2024 season for Boise State, recording 3 receptions for 13 yards. Noah Thomas would spend a total of 3 seasons at A&M before recently transferring to Georgia. He finished his time as an Aggie with 73 receptions for 984 yards and 15 touchdowns. He led the Aggies in every receiving category in 2024 with 39 receptions, 574 yards, and 8 touchdowns. A&M would sign 3 tight ends, all being top 10 players in their positions and 4 stars. All 3 tight ends would have production at some point in their time as Aggies, but only one remains on the roster today, being Theo Mellon Orstra. Donovan Green would spend 3 seasons as an Aggie with 223 yards and 2 touchdowns in a season, and he is now with LSU with 2 years of eligibility left. Jake Johnson would break out 1 year with 4 touchdowns, 235 yards on 24 receptions in 2023 before going to UNC with his brother. The offensive line class was headlined by two top 10 offensive linemen in Cam Dewberry and Williams. Two other players committed in the room were Hunter Erb and Mark Naboo. Cam Dewberry would start in 5 out of 7 games he appeared in as a freshman, and even gained some freshman All-American honors. But the rest of his career as an Aggie, he would continue to play in every game he was available, but would only make 2 more starts before transferring to Alabama for his last year of eligibility. Williams would only appear in 1 game as an Aggie as a freshman before being suspended for the Miami locker room incident, and he would eventually transfer to SMU at season's end, where he's currently the starting tackle for SMU in that playoff roster they just had in 2024. Out of these 4 offensive linemen, only one remains on A&M today, and that's Mark Naboo. He is also the only one to start an entire season. While expected to regain his job back in 2025, he is returning from a season-ending injury suffered in the first game of 2024. The Aggie defensive line/edge class was loaded with talent and the most impressive unit of this class that they brought in. Among 8 signees, 7 were top 100 prospects, and 4 were 5 stars. Of these 8 signees, only 1 would finish their career as an Aggie, and 1 is currently on the roster still. The highest rated one would end up being Walter Nolan. He was also an immediate impact player as one of the best defensive tackles in the SEC by his second year at A&M. But just like many others in this video, he would transfer and end up at Ole Miss, where he was an All-American this past season, as he finished his career with 114 tackles, 26 tackles for loss, and 11.5 sacks. The 5-star that would remain as an Aggie his entire career was Shamar Stewart. He would finish his time at A&M with a career total of 65 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks. He's expected to be drafted in the 2025 NFL Draft. LT Overton was another productive player from that group, playing 2 years at A&M totaling 48 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack before transferring to Alabama. The other remaining players would be rotational backups, with Anthony Lucas transferring to USC after a season, Anae White to Penn State after 3, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy to South Carolina after 3, Malik Silla to Mississippi State after 3, and Jaden Scarlett is still on the roster. A&M would bring in 2 linebackers this class, being Martrell Harris Jr. and Ish Harris, who are both 4 stars in said class. Martrell would spend 3 seasons at A&M playing sparingly as a backup and is currently in the transfer portal. Ish, on the other hand, would spend a season at A&M before transferring to Houston. He would leave the Houston Cougars football team before the start of the 2023 season and seems to not be in football at the moment. The defensive back class would feature 7 signees, 4 cornerbacks and 3 safeties, all of which would be 4-star rated players. The highest coveted player would be 5-star signee Denver Harris. Denver Harris only played 1 season at A&M, where he was making an immediate impact before being suspended from the team 5 games in the season due to the said Miami locker room incident. He would enter the portal after 1 season after recording 14 tackles and 3 pass deflections. Since then, Denver Harris has played for several different schools and is now on his 4th school in his 4th year of college football, now being at UNLV after stops at A&M, LSU, and UTSA. The 4 other DBs in that class are not currently on the team either, being Jacoby Matthews, who would be an early impact player for the Aggies, playing 2 seasons for them totaling 66 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, half a sack, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery, and 7 pass deflections. He would enter the portal after the 2023 season despite being a highly touted player in the portal. He is currently still not on the team since the end of the 2024 season and is still in said portal. Bobby Taylor was one of the most highly sought after players in the state of Texas coming out of the 2022 class. But similar to Jacoby, he would also play 2 seasons with the team as a backup before ultimately stepping away from football altogether going into his junior year. Smoke Bowie, a cornerback from Georgia, would play a season with the Aggies playing as a backup in 7 games. As a freshman, he would enter the portal at season's end and wind up at Georgia, his hometown state. He would never play a game at Georgia, as he would be off the team by July and enter the portal in August, and he's still not with a team. The final player of this group that would not finish with A&M is Marquise Groves-Killebrew, who would spend a season as a backup with A&M, then transfer to Louisville for a season where he was also again a depth piece, then transferred this most previous season to Arizona, where he would have totaled 26 tackles, 1 sack, 1 TFL, and a pass deflection. He would actually enter the portal a 4th time and even committed to Nebraska, but is ultimately back at Arizona. The two players that have stayed at A&M the entire time and are still on the team is Bryce Anderson and Jared Kerr. Bryce Anderson would be an immediate impact player as a freshman for the Aggies, and by his sophomore season he was a starter and one of the most promising young players on the team, totaling 54 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1 half sacks, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and forced pass deflections. This previous season, he would have some ups and downs starting in 5 of the 12 games he appeared in, and is expected to be a critical part of the Aggie defense in 2025. Jared Kerr has appeared in 35 games in his career with 5 starts in 3 seasons for the Aggies, totaling 48 tackles, 2 TFLs, 2 sacks, 3 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. To close this video off, I will be talking about kicker signee Ethan Misowski, who was rated as a 5-star by Kohl's Kicking and the number 2 kicker by 24/7 Sports in that said class. He has spent a total of 2 seasons at Texas A&M as a backup before transferring to Illinois as a backup in 2024, and he's looking to take the job in 2025. While the 2022 Texas A&M recruiting class is the highest ranked / rated class of all time according to modern recruiting history, it is also one that seems to be one that will always be a big what if. As now, with many of these players having roughly 1 to 2 years of college eligibility remaining, the recruiting class did not live close to the hype.